Over the past 30 to 40 years, we have witnessed an unprecedented phenomenon, the rapid economic transformation of the People's Republic of China. Regardless of one's views on China, whether positive or negative, it's undeniable that their development has accomplished feats that were once unimaginable. Decades ago, few could comprehend the strategies China was employing. At that time, China's journey was just beginning, and it was understandable that many didn't pay close attention. They were merely one of many impoverished nations striving to change their circumstances. Americans familiar with Pearl Buck's novel The Good Earth might recall the depiction of extreme poverty. For suburban kids like me, it was difficult to grasp the reality of such hardship. In just a few decades, China achieved levels of economic growth that took Western Europe several centuries, and the United States at least 150 years to reach. This rapid development is unparalleled. China harnessed resources, borrowed from other countries, and successfully combined these elements into a productive system. Measured by economic growth and poverty alleviation, China's achievements are staggering. With a population of 1.4 billion, about 4 to 5 times that of the United States, they managed to lift millions out of poverty. Furthermore, China now rivals the United States in high-tech industries. Where American companies like Intel and Apple lead, China has developed comparable alternatives. In some sectors, they have even surpassed the US. For instance, around 10 to 15 years ago, automakers worldwide initiated programs to develop electric vehicles as alternatives to traditional fossil fuel cars. While many countries produced electric vehicles, China's models emerged as superior in quality and affordability. China essentially won the competition. This type of global competition isn't new. Various countries have led in different industries at different times. In response, the US government imposed tariffs to make Chinese electric vehicles too expensive for American buyers. Under the Biden administration, these tariffs are set at 100%. For example, if a Chinese electric car costs $30,000, an American buyer would need to pay an additional $30,000 in tariffs to the US government, effectively making the car cost $60,000. As a result, no Chinese electric vehicles are currently sold in the United States. In contrast, in Europe, Chinese electric cars make up about a quarter of the vehicles on the road. The fastest growing, most successful car company in the world today is one that most Americans are unaware of. It's identified by 3 letters, B, Y, and D, BYD Corporation. The US government's approach to dealing with this company has been to exclude it from the market. From an economic perspective, this strategy is not just counterproductive, it's short-sighted and misguided. Why? As the global shift to electric vehicles accelerates, competitors of the United States in every sector are able to purchase high-quality electric cars for $30,000. These vehicles provide them with a competitive edge. Meanwhile, American companies are forced to pay $40,000 to $50,000 for a comparable yet often inferior vehicle due to tariffs. Based on fundamental economic principles, this approach is counterproductive at best and irrational at worst. When I studied economics, this kind of policy was classified somewhere between self-defeating and stupid. During my time earning a PhD in economics at Yale, one of my classmates was Janet Yellen, now the US Secretary of the Treasury. I know that she understands how counterproductive this policy is, yet she supports it because it aligns with the official stance of the government. The reality is that the US is falling behind China in this competition. This kind of response suggests desperation. Instead of devising a strategy to compete with China effectively, the US is choosing to erect barriers. Policymakers in Washington believe this isolates China, but in reality, they are isolating themselves. From an international perspective, it appears as though a declining power is struggling to maintain its dominance. Many nations are taking notice, and some are even relishing the decline. As a country, the US needs to wake up and address this issue. For decades, developing countries across Asia, Africa, Latin America, and even parts of North America and Europe have aimed to improve their economic circumstances. Yet while many aspired to change, China succeeded. This leads to a critical question. How did China achieve this? The answer lies in building on existing foundations. China's rise wasn't some sudden or mysterious event. The West often portrays China's development as solely reliant on adopting Western technologies. While it's true that China leveraged Western advancements, they did so transparently and strategically. Roughly 25 years ago, China made a clear offer to the developed world, including the United States, Europe, and Japan, whose success they hoped to emulate. They understood the principles of capitalism and the importance of profit. With this in mind, they proposed a mutually beneficial arrangement. Two key factors drove China's economic rise: an educated, disciplined, and exceptionally low-cost labor force, combined with the fastest-growing market in the world. In business schools, aspiring entrepreneurs are taught to invest where labor is inexpensive and demand is expanding. Businesses followed this advice and went to China, capitalizing on these exact conditions. They made enormous profits. This success pressured competitors who had been hesitant, making them realize that if they didn't also establish operations in China, they risked being outperformed. Companies that produced goods using cheaper Chinese labor could dominate markets while also accessing China's massive consumer base. For instance, General Motors now sells more vehicles in China than in the United States. These trends illustrate a strategic shift that many attempted, but China executed successfully. The BRICS organization further represents the spread of China's economic model globally, a development that should deeply concern the United States. The 20th century left us with two dominant economic systems: the Anglo-American model, characterized by private enterprise and capitalism, and the Soviet model, which relied on state-owned and operated industries, particularly in the industrial sector. Predictably, some people found flaws in both systems and sought a hybrid approach that combined the strengths of each while discarding their weaknesses. One could argue that Mao Zedong and the Chinese Communist Party pursued such a hybrid system. It's often overlooked that during the 1960s, tensions between the Soviet Union and China escalated to armed conflict. These disagreements were fundamental and deep-rooted, making China's strategic pivot unsurprising. China chose to invite foreign businesses, acknowledging that Western technology was more advanced in many areas. Chinese academic journals frequently discussed this strategy for years. Rather than stealing technology, China learned from the United States through mutually agreed arrangements. American companies willingly entered these deals, exchanging their technological expertise for access to low-cost labor and China's burgeoning market. The transactions were clear. In return for technology and knowledge, China provided labor and market access. Both sides profited. American businesses gained financially, and China gained technological expertise. The deal with China was straightforward and transparent. To misrepresent it now is disingenuous. It's like agreeing to trade $5 for a shirt, completing the exchange, and then accusing the other person of stealing the shirt. That accusation wouldn't be true. You didn't steal the shirt. We made a deal. Regretting the deal after the fact is a different issue entirely. But no theft occurred. The Chinese feel deep resentment toward these claims of theft. To them, it echoes a century of humiliation, with the implied message that they are too unsophisticated, too backward, or too Chinese to achieve success on their own. The suggestion that they must have stolen technology reinforces this narrative, implying that only others, those at the supposed center of innovation, could accomplish such feats. This mindset has roots in reality. For a long time, the United States did lead in innovation and groundbreaking technology. Silicon Valley earned much of its reputation through genuine achievements. However, even Silicon Valley benefited from innovations that originated in other parts of the world, as has always been the case throughout history. When a society rises from the decline of another, a certain form of chauvinism often emerges. The victors rewrite history, portraying their own people and communities as the driving forces of progress and downplaying the contributions of others. This selective narrative can eventually lead to erasing those contributions altogether. A fitting analogy is American baseball. When I was young, I loved baseball, a sport I perceived as exclusively white. I wondered why there were no black players. The common explanation was that black people didn't play baseball or couldn't excel at it. But the reality was different. The significance of Jackie Robinson breaking that barrier was monumental. Today, it's clear that black athletes not only excel in sports, but dominate professional leagues. Their exclusion wasn't due to a lack of talent. It stemmed from other social and systemic reasons. The same principle applies to economic development. A society's rise or fall depends on the way its decisions are structured. The collapse of historical Chinese empires, for example, can be explained by their reliance on a feudal system, much like the class structures of lords and serfs that existed in Europe during the Middle Ages. This framework ultimately limited growth and progress. China's recent success lies in understanding these historical lessons and creating new strategies. The same system that allowed European feudal societies to achieve great things also planted the seeds of their decline. This principle is directly relevant to China's story today. China aims to leverage the successes of private capitalism, particularly modern industrialization, but they also recognize, partly due to their ideology, that the very factors that drive progress can also lead to collapse. Being aware of this duality is essential for managing it wisely. This dynamic is evident when comparing the United States and China. In the United States, innovation happens when it is profitable for someone to pursue it. When an opportunity to make substantial profit appears, entrepreneurs seize it. This approach has led to many achievements, and Americans rightly take pride in it. As someone who teaches these principles, I fully acknowledge their value. However, China has adopted a different strategy. They acknowledge the power of profit-driven innovation, but they also understand its limitations. If the sole focus of innovation is private profitability, some opportunities will be overlooked or underfunded, ultimately stalling progress. China's approach is to balance both systems. Half of their economy operates on private profit incentives, allowing individuals to create wealth. In fact, China now ranks second, after the United States, in the number of private millionaires and billionaires. They have permitted and encouraged this growth. But the other half of their economy operates differently. Economic and technological development is guided by social objectives set by the Communist Party and the government. If they want to surpass the United States in key technological areas and private enterprise isn't stepping up, they proceed anyway. State-driven initiatives fill the gaps, ensuring that progress continues even in sectors where private profit isn't immediately viable. If private enterprise eventually joins in, that's welcomed. If not, the state continues moving forward. This strategy allows China to invest in areas where the United States does not. The issue isn't that America lacks the necessary technology, expertise, or scientists. Rather, the US economic system prioritizes private profitability. If an opportunity isn't immediately lucrative, it often receives limited investment. These opportunities aren't ignored entirely, but they tend to be underfunded and remain more aspirational than actionable. In contrast, China considers profit important, but not as the sole objective. Profit is just one factor among many. Their development strategy encompasses a broader set of goals, balancing economic growth with social priorities. This is what they mean when they refer to socialism, a system where private profit is one objective, but not the ultimate priority.